I know when they'll change. Your kids start getting killed. White people's kids start getting killed. Smoking that doobie that's actually legal probably in your state now, but they don't know what it was. And then the kid runs and it pop, 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 pop.
Oh, my goodness. He meant what he said. CNN anchor Chris Cuomo doubling down on remarks suggesting that police reform will only happen if, and these are his words, white people's children get killed. Here he is last night.
I don't know if you were watching Friday night, but I said something that every one of you knows to be true. If what we're seeing in these communities were happening to kids in suburbs, to adults in suburbs, if they suffered the same fate as we see too often with these black kids, if they died in policing situations, things would change.
Oh my gosh, and no one uses the R word against him? He thinks there are no black people in the suburbs. I'm going to use the I word. He is straight up ignorant, Lawrence. There are black people in the suburbs?
Yeah.
What's he talking about?
A lot. And I reject the premise of his conversation because it's just factually not true. Look, I'm not going to deny. I've been very transparent of some of the bad experiences that I've had. I've had mostly good experiences. I've talked about Tim Scott being stopped 9 times in the Capitol. Mm-hmm. So I understand the experience, and I'm not saying folks don't have a right to be outraged. But when there are white folks that are killed, people don't say anything. Daniel Schaefer was shot right in the back, crawling, right? You got Timothy Kaufman that died with a knee on his neck, and there was no outrage about that incident as well. And this is not speaking for all cops. But when there's bad apples that kill white folks as well, people don't speak out against that as well. So maybe this is just a conversation of how we view the authority of the state. Most of us respect cops, and we believe that they do the right thing on the majority of the cases, 90% of the time. But when those bad apples get it wrong, sometimes we don't hold them accountable. What changed in the George Floyd case? The reason why it galvanized so many people, I believe, is because we were in the middle of a pandemic, and people saw the state very differently. When you saw mothers being on playgrounds, being put in paddy wagons for being on the street, that people didn't like that, and they looked at the state very differently. So we came together. That's just my thoughts.
Tommy.
Yeah, again, I would just wonder when CNN and Chris Cuomo in particular are going to be outraged about all the violence that's happening in inner city communities around the country. They're not reporting on that. If it bleeds, it leads. But it seems to be only when they can push the agenda and the narrative that they want to push and the narrative that they want to advance. And furthermore, back to Lawrence's point as well, I think that that's an incredibly valid point to make. You know, again, race has been used by the left over and over and over again. And as I said in this last segment, they have to make half the country feel like victims and half the country feel like racist. And we all have to answer either for our white privilege or for our victimhood. And it's utterly ridiculous. But CNN does this. They say things like this because they're sending a message to those in communities that, hey, you guys are victims. The white Democrats, the white liberals, we're the ones that are going to take care of you. The bad Republicans, the bad conservatives. At the end of the day, it's not helping anybody. And going back to some of these cases at hand as well, if people like Chris Cuomo and those that are leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement and others, including Maxine Waters, if they wanted to protect people of color and black lives, the message that they would also be sending is one of compliance. You know, you might have a bad interaction with an officer, but if you comply with that officer, 9 times out of 10, you're going to go home safely to your family, and so is that officer. So that needs to be part of the discussion as well. Everyone wants to focus on race. In every single one of these instances, race, race, race. Let's also focus on the actions of the suspect and the victim and say, hey, listen, there are bad apples out there in the policing community, but if you comply, you will go home safe to your family at night. That needs to be the message, not one of martyrdom for resisting arrest. It's deadly, it's reckless, it's dangerous, and it's stupid.
You know, what Lawrence was talking about is a different way to use the word race. What I teach my children, we're part of the human race, and our skin may be a different color, but that is the race that we belong in and belong to. And it is through that that we have the togetherness that it's going to take to get through all of this. Kaylee, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Harris, and that's a beautiful message to teach your daughters. Look, this is amazing. Chris Cuomo needs to take a hard look in the mirror, because he also said in his cleanup of these comments, or double down, if you will, he said, look, this has brought out some of the worst and most divisive rhetoric out of us, this incident and these racial tensions. Well, he's one of the chief perpetrators of that. He said, who says protests have to be peaceful? Those were words from the mouth of Chris Cuomo before making further incendiary remarks. We all need to step back and say, how is my rhetoric contributing to the conversation? Because the beautiful lessons you're teaching your daughter, Harris, are a far cry from the kind of rhetoric we see from Chris Cuomo and others on television.
If I said it, I meant it. Bite my tongue for no one, for no one.